If you spent any time with Betty, if you read her books or watched our YouTube clips or any interview she gave, there was one refrain, and she would repeat it over and over again. She'd say, masturbation is the foundation of all human sexuality. And it is the repression of childhood masturbation that blocks sexual development, normal sexual development, especially in young girls. And she would talk about, it's very simple. A child puts their hand down their pants, or they're holding their vulva or their sex organ anyway. It could be boys too. And the hand is moved away or it's slapped. And that's the first sexual repression most of us experience. And one day we were having clit tales. And that's where a lot of our strategy and content initiatives and just my schooling happened. We would work all day, and at like 5 o'clock, we'd pour ourselves a drink, enjoy our clit tales, not our cocktails. And I would just ask Betty questions. And one day I put it together, like the right question to ask. And I just said, Betty, how did you get there? Like, I know, you were masturbating and you were having orgasms and you made that connection, but how did you understand that it was the prohibition and the stigma of masturbation that's what maintained sexual inequality and the rape culture, and at the same time focused people on just heteronormative procreative sex? How did you get there? Because that's a big kind of, epiphany to have. And she looked at me from across the table, smiled wide, and said, my art. I didn't get it. I was like, what do you mean your art? She's like, well, the two exhibitions, the love picture exhibition and the masturbating nude exhibition. So we started with the love picture exhibition. It was her first exhibition as an artist, a female artist, in 1968. And what she had done is Polaroid had come out and said, Carlin, that was so liberating, because for the first time you could take nude or sexual pictures and not have them confiscated. And if you're older, you'll know that we used to take photos on film and then you go to the photomat and you'd have them developed. And if they were nudes, usually they were taken away or thrown out. So Grant got Betty a Polaroid and she started to create with it. And she was in her art studio and she said, I really wanted to kind of document my partner sex, because it was how I was achieving orgasm during partner sex and no one had done it before. So she took Polaroids, and I think it was two partners. It was her and Grant, and then her and Roy, which was her karate boyfriend. It was very ripped. And she took a series of the Polaroids, and then she drew the images, and she called it the Love Picture Exhibition. So there was missionary, 69, oral sex, very timid things, but beautiful, beautiful line drawings. I think she used pencil mostly, and she would do these little hash marks, and then you'd see she kind of shade out, and you'd be like, oh my God, there's that beautiful muscle in the leg. Really striking work. So she goes to a gallery and they say, okay, let's do it. Let's mount an exhibition. And this is a big deal in 1968 because female artists were not being shown. So Betty felt like, yeah, I did it, because I went from art school where Jackson Pollock and crew would debate at the bar whether or not women could be artists. And now I'm having an exhibition and it's on, Madison Avenue. Like, this is the big time, New York City. So she has all of the drawings. Everyone comes and everyone is elated. She said people are just kind of like turned on in the show. And she didn't know what to wear. She said what she decided on was this like gold lame top and bottom with her hair stacked high and a gold trench coat. And then she'd found this leather whip and I don't know where in Chinatown. And she decided that would be a good accessory to have in her hand when she went into the gallery. So here's the visual of her gold lame, right? The golden goddess with a whip. And when Grant saw her, he said, Betty, you're such a dom. And Betty said, what do you mean? He's like, a dominatrix. And I don't know what you mean. Betty Dodson didn't know what a dominatrix was in 1968. See, everything with Betty was she was feeling it. She was channeling, and it was coming out, and it was just natural. So the exhibition, everything sells. Huge success. People love it. And then this is the beginning of people thinking she's an expert on sex. Because obviously she must be. She's having sex with all of these people and she's drawing it in the pictures. And then she became like a darling of the jet set. And she spent a lot of time in the south of France and everyone loved her. And her mother, Bessie, came to the opening and loved it. Like, she was so proud of Betty. So she has this huge success. And they want a second show. And Betty said, the love picture, it was like, what's next? And in her personal life, she'd kind of moved away from partner sex. It was almost like a distraction. And she was trying to have casual sex. Her and Grant had an open relationship. And she just said, Carlin, it was so easy for Grant to have casual sex on his terms. And it was so hard for me to find male partners that were open and had skills and that, just didn't want me to lie there while they gratified themselves. So she was struggling. So she decided the next exhibition would be a series of masturbating nudes because that she felt was the constant in her sex life, the sex she had with herself. At the time, she was dating Romeo, so you'll see several Romeo masturbating nudes. Other men, she had one guy reading pornography, lying down on a couch. And then she did Jackie, which is the famous one with the panabrator vibrator on her hand. And she's masturbating with her vibrator. And several females, several males. And when she was pitching the owner of the gallery, she kind of said, I'm going to do some masturbating nudes. And she said, I don't think he really was listening. So it's time to bring the pieces and hang them on the wall and get ready for the show. And Betty shows up and the owner hits the ceiling. He's like, what? These are pornographic. I don't understand. Bah, 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 bah. And Betty's dumbfounded. And Betty's like, in that moment, she's thinking, what's different? Because in the love picture, you could see a little bit of penis penetrating. It was just as, I guess, explicit. And she found these images much more kind of low key and sacred. And he was like, that's it. We can't have this show. You can maybe show some of the women, but you can't show the men. And was doing all these things. And she's on the phone with Grant. And Grant's like, look, you're going to have to tell him you're going to pull the show. Like, you already sent out all of the invites. So the only way to get it done the way you want to do is just be able to say, fuck off. I'm taking the pictures and we're leaving. And that's what happened. And he consented and said, okay, that's fine. But he made sure that Romeo was like in the back room behind a plant. Like, he was really upset about the male masturbating nudes, which was interesting because he was a gay man. But I guess maybe those would be seen as the most graphic and objectionable. So those were kind of hidden in the back and they pulled the women forward. And they have the opening night. And Betty said it was a mess. She was nervous. The gallery owner was crazy. And when the people came, and this is probably mostly the people who'd come to the love picture, right? And they had been so elated and turned on. And she said it was the opposite. People were freaking out. And she said at one point, they actually had cops come into the gallery and be like, what's going on here? There's a ruckus, because there was like this energy inside and outside the gallery. And the cops walked around and they're like, we're not sure this is legal. And Betty's like, what? It's a picture I drew. You know what I mean? Like, it's a picture, it's art. They left. And she said there was one man who came up to her and was very upset. And he was, criticizing her and saying, how dare you show these images, and getting all mad. And then his wife came over and said, Harold, we have to go home. And he left. Nothing sold. It was a huge failure. She didn't make any money. She lost money because when you're the artist, you have to pay to transport. And she had done, of course, like 6-foot drawings of masturbating nudes. So she didn't make any money. The owner was like, never again. I'm never showing your work. Technically she may have been arrested. Like in the moment you're the artist, right? And they're having the showing and the cops come in and you're thinking, oh, great. It's a failure. I didn't make any money. And now I'm going to have to post bail. And she went home and she felt like shit. And she's sitting there several days later, and she said, Carlin, all of a sudden, I got it. I got why the love picture was so positive and the masturbating news was so negative. Because we repress masturbation. Because masturbation is dirty. It's wrong. Partner sex is okay because it's procreative. It was heterosexual imagery. And that's okay. And we can all look at it. And we can all love it. But if you talk about self-sexuality, she's like, I realized I hit it. I bottom-lined it. I bottom-lined sexual repression. It was the repression of masturbation because not one person in that room said, wow, that's interesting. What's that on the back of her hand? Is that a vibrator? Oh, orgasms. How many orgasms can you? No conversation, no dialogue. Everyone just shut down and got angry. And she said, Carlin, if you provoke people and people feel anger when they're looking at your work as an artist, you did something right. You hit on something. And it was in that moment that I realized that I was going to march for masturbation, that this had to be something that I brought out into the light. So this is before liberating masturbation, before body sex, before all of it. So she had that in the back of her mind. And it's interesting because I always thought her activism came from, the orgy scene and the faking orgasms. And I think that was a piece of it, right? But it was this moment as, who are artists? It's like art is social commentary. It's what's going on in the culture. It's a reflection. So Betty held the mirror up and she saw the need. And that's why she went down that path of sexology, right? And sex education. And we need to teach women how to masturbate because if a woman doesn't know how to bring herself to an orgasm, how can she know herself? It's that simple. And, I see it now today. Women don't take their hands and put them down on their genitals and explore them as teen girls. There's this break. It's like you don't need to masturbate. You don't need to have pleasure. If you touch yourself, you become a nymphomaniac. And really, that's that natural, organic first step in your sexuality. I'm in bed, I wake up, or I'm doing whatever, and I rub on something, or something feels a tingle, and then I explore that, and I develop that, and I make that neural connection in my mind, make that connection to my genitals and my brain, and we get that feedback loop of pleasure and orgasm, and I get a hit of all those hormones, and I know myself. And then I'm ready to go into partner sex, right? And be able to communicate my needs and my wants and stand on my own 2 feet and say yes and say no and say what I like, my preference. It really is how women are broken down. It's like we break them down before they even start. And that's what I've realized. And we realized together in the groups, like nothing had changed. When we relaunched the workshops, Betty would say it was almost frustrating that Carlin women are saying the same things they said in the 70s. It's the same dilemma. My body doesn't exist for my pleasure. I've been conditioned that it exists for someone else, and it has to be skinny and beautiful and preened. And I wait for them, passive. And body sex was about becoming active. And I think that's why I find Betty's art so compelling. Because if you go through the gallery and you go through the periods and the progression, it's her journey and it's our journey. It's the social indictment of how women are treated in the culture and finding your way to self-love. And orgasm is just a tool. So it would be interesting if you could look at the Love Picture exhibition and then compare it to the Masturbating Nudes and see what comes up for you. I love her later work because then it becomes all joy. You can feel the conflict in the beginning of her trying to find her voice and find her way. And then in the early 70s, she just hits her stride. I think what set Betty apart from others in her time and before her was her ability to see truth, see it plainly, see through all the subtext and be like, hold on a minute, here it is. And then lead the way. Find the courage, or maybe it was lack of impulse control, but just say, you know what, I'm going to take on the hardest thing in the culture. Feminists called her the mother of masturbation, and in a way it was a little bit of a slight. But Betty owned it. And Betty's like, yeah, you're right, because masturbation is the foundation of all human sexuality. And it was Betty's ability to say, yeah, I don't care what you think, because I know what's true. And I'm going to stay on the side of truth. And she did for her whole career. And it's why I have such utter respect for every choice and every piece of art and every article and every book. There is no one who towed the line for women and female sexuality like Betty Dodson. She is our hero.